All right, thanks everybody for coming. This is our second reading we've done here, and we're very grateful to the space, to the Wise Owl owners, Eileen and Jill and Lynn Nani, who's not here right now, but she's a writer and she's very encouraging of literary arts in general, and we're so happy to have this space that we can do in it what we want. And we're going to do a featured reader, Don Wallis, tonight for 20 minutes. We'll take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back for the open reading. So if anybody hasn't signed up yet, there's still time. And if you'll turn your cell phones on silent, that would be great. Our featured reader tonight is Don Wallis, artist, writer, puppeteer, actor, and producer. Don Wallis has been reading his poetry in public since 1964. And if there's anyone in this county who can top that for dedication to the art form, I'd like to meet them. Don has produced more than 60 theatrical productions and acted in over 100 roles on stage and radio, including one-man shows of historical figures such as Mark Twain, Miguel de Cervantes, Charles Dickens, and John Muir. He has performed more than 900 poetry readings and other dramatic recitations, and over 9,000 live puppet shows, and I cannot even count that high. And these audiences have been in Santa Monica, Solvang, Bakersfield, Monterey, San Luis Obispo Farmers Market, and he's toured the European cities of Paris, Munich, and Salzburg as well. It's an honor to have Don here tonight to share his work. Please welcome Don Wallis to the Wise Owl.
Thank you. It's always nice to go to these village events in Scotland and Wales. Hey, how are you? I'm well. In fact, I'm so well I'm almost Welsh. You're the only people that have ever laughed at that little joke of mine. I'm in a humorous mood. However, the selection I've been preparing to read this evening is of a bit different tone, but there's a few smiles in it here and there. I'm used to poetry readings and performances of other kinds, and the older I get, the more I look at adults and I see you as children. But I mean that in a complimentary way. We have some chairs up here, and I'd love to see some people sitting in them.
I can do that because of my eye.
Fine. But if anybody needs a chair, they can just come up at any time and sit there. I want to move this, but it's all hooked in. So when I talk about children this evening, I'm talking about you as well. And I tell you that right off the beginning. And I'm delighted to have an art historian person, Tess, in the audience. I was trained in intellectual and cultural history of the modern world, and that's impossible to know much about that. I sure tried. And I'm going to cut it down a little bit. I thought it was a half an hour.
Oh, don't sweat it.
I won't sweat it. If I get tired, I'll cut something. And I love doing readings, and it became a very life-saving part of my life as a young child. And I was doing poetry readings while I was still in high school. The teachers would have me read to the classes under me, never to my peers, because I also played football, and that just wouldn't work. I grew up in California in America, so it wouldn't have worked to have a football player reading poetry. So I think I'll just start to give you a sense of how I do these things. I'm going to talk a lot about children and war this evening, but I'm not going to try to talk you into anything except treating the child inside you nicely, which I'm sure you all do on a day-to-day basis anyhow. And I had the whole day here, and Cambria and Cayucas are filled with memories of my family, my grandparents, my parents, my 250 cousins. So I've just been enriched today with memory. Thank you for coming this evening. My labors and wages. I've limped down dirt roads with rusted shoe nails jabbing me in the heels. I've hallucinated from being ill with fever. I've mounted thousands of boulders to reach the snowy edge of an ice-clear lake in Muir's high Sierras. I've tasted mountain spring water and felt the heat of my own pee burning my legs. I've popped blisters on my hands inside bleeding leather gloves as I've dug holes for fence posts, lifting and ramming a post hole digger in and out of mud and downpouring rain. I've walked beaches thinking about dying while pelicans dove for their next meal and beached kelp rotted just a ways away. And I've thanked nurses through the tears in my teeth for lifting my back and raising my head so I could breathe through the smiles on my face. I've sweat picking string beans beside illiterate children bent over in fields right out of Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath. And I've read Solomon, Shakespeare, and Twain aloud to their folks and relatives living near me in the sticks. I've looked, listened, and spoken from my heart since the beginning, to see and hear God's voice upon the waters and the sounds of her children playing on the shores of earth. I've carried bags of books, paper and pencils over my shoulders. I've jotted down words and polished them to be more visual and emotive, and then more melodic and rhythmical like my voice. I've written plays, stories, and poems, and when I wasn't writing, I've carved puppets out of wood and drawn the people I loved in sand on a bank along a river in the world. And if later you feel any compulsion to respond, save anything like that till the very end. But you can say, oh no, or ah, or whatever. I might say a lot of oh no or ah. My labors and wages. This next piece, poetry and art. And I remind you, when I talk about children, I'm talking about you and the people right next to you. You're warned. I also, having been a football player and a poet most of my life, I wear this as a warning to people when they approach me. You know, I want to give them a warning in a nice way. Because people are always approaching other people, right? With love and warmth and tenderness and charity and compassion and good words and compliments. And yeah, so I like to warn people that there's a wild animal over here. Poetry and art. Some children see sunlight shining through water drops hanging on their eyelashes when they wake up in the morning and start to become aware of themselves as they begin to see the things around them. Some babies in diapers grab at dandelions and chase butterflies like the bold and bare-faced monk Thomas Merton, running around with his camera, tripping on his cassock, and falling with a full moon glowing all over his grinning face. And some teenagers go dancing with their partners, twirling them like the curly-haired painter Marc Chagall, holding a white wedding dress as it disappears out of his arms, like a cloud into vapor, into breath, high in the sky, while the green and yellow head of a bull moves sweet alfalfa lyrics to a blue and white cow. Oh.
Yummy noises are okay.
Oh, who but a tiny little girl would want to pour bottled water on the damp sand at the edge of a beach, to muddy it, enough to squish between her toes and fingers, as if she were planting her thoughts and feelings inside her, and deepening her body into the ground? Who but a 9-year-old girl would dream of being on her grandmother's farm and standing beside her while she sat on a cracked oak stool milking a cow, and showing her grandma how she too could dip her hand into a pail of rich cream and let the baby calf lick the milk off her fingers? And who but a teenage Cinderella would try to survive 7 years of grief by hunting the shelves of literature to touch the wild animals in the poems of Elizabeth Bishop, or dusting the cobwebbed walls of art history to be held by the paintings of Mary Cassatt? I'm still a 2-year-old boy, out searching for sour grass, lost in a pasture of weeds. And I'm with the older boys, wandering aimlessly in the shade of dark trees in the black forest, and with the others crouching among gargoyles, overlooking the hunchback of Notre Dame. Boys hang from tree limbs. They throw tantrums like gorillas caged in cardboard boxes, and kick telephone poles like martyrs being crucified all down the sidewalks on their block. Some days I'm afraid and a coward, with a long day ahead to think. And who but the other boys, like Tolstoy, would climb up on a tractor to greet another sunrise and plow the earth until it sets? Or like Hemingway would squeeze their teddy bear one last time before they crawled up out of a trench to face a bullet or a bayonet. And some, like Homer and Goya, stare directly into the sun or at the moon long enough to go blind. The things we children wind up doing bores us to death sometimes, and then amazes us immensely, even more than art can express. I was born right after World War II. I was called a baby boomer after the explosion of the atomic bomb. Boy, I like taking a joke and making it serious real quick. Top secret. And oh yes, I too have loved I've met a few people that didn't love their parents, and some with good reason, but I loved my parents with everything inside me. However, top secret. My parents would never admit they dropped depth charges into the darkness in my room, or that they helped float mines in the silence in this world. So I'm still hiding in my closet, fingering the button eyes of my soggy stuffed animal, too afraid to talk, watching their eyes and lips drift drift away like lighthouse lamps and rubber rafts as they say again, don't be afraid. And tears flood my lungs, and my heart starts to float like a drowned man's body in a submarine. I've chosen mostly longer poems, but that was my short poem for the evening. I started out using strong images in my teens and early 20s, and my poems were awful. They weren't very polished, but they were filled with vivid images that were quite different than Bob Dylan's. And I used my wild images to make college professors think I was very intelligent or artistic or something. And so even though my poems were horribly unpolished, I got to read a lot of them a lot of places. This takes place in San Francisco. The hate referred to in the second line is Haight-Ashbury. A movie in my head. Oh, I want to tell you the story. Down at UCSB at the Isla Vista, I was talking to a woman there, a grad student, and she said, why spend millions and hundreds of millions of dollars to make a movie? Why? When all I have to do is make a movie up in my own mind, and I'm quite happy with it. I trust she was not that exceptional of a human being. And I see every movie that comes to San Luis Obispo County pretty much. I just thought I'd share that with you. Why spend all these hundreds of millions of dollars on movies when I can make up my own movie in my own mind? I don't hear enough of that, so I just share that with you. A movie in my head. This is from a long time ago. Acting like a stoned kid wandering out of the hate, I stepped off the curb into a cumulus cloud somewhere over an intersection in San Francisco, and I rose, losing my breath, hearing the people on the sidewalk screaming through the clouded brilliance of the light. And raising my eyes, I rolled my shoulders into fancy yellow solar rays as wide and illuminated as the Pacific. And the thought came to me that I might be a kamikaze, or on a bomber flying away from Hiroshima or Nagasaki. And I became afraid I might see bodies of well-behaved children who needed doctors and nurses and bandages and blood, trying to walk or crawl across the dust and ashes among the clouds around me. So I closed my eyes and really wondered who but the land or the ocean would hold any of these children, wipe their tears, hum them songs, and promise them they would never be harmed again. And squinting my eyes real tight, I saw the children playing most attentively, and some were trying to get the adults in their families and neighborhoods to stop what they were doing and join them. And those who did started smiling. And I shivered, feeling my eyes and nostrils opening among the sweet-smelling cherry tree blossoms between me and a cool moon outside Kyoto. But my screen went blank. My projector unwound my color film on the floor, and the screams I had first heard on the set finally became the voice of a lovely young mother in Korea or Vietnam, humming a lullaby to her child. Celeste, we talked, you try to figure out a program. Well, this was a part of a novel that failed mine. Not everything I've done has been successful. A lot of the stuff I've done, it's good to be prolific, because a lot of the stuff I've done has eventually wound up in the wastebasket where it belonged.
No.
Oh yeah. That's a part of the joy, because then when something survives and doesn't wind up in the wastebasket, oh boy, it just makes me feel so good. So anyhow, this wound up to be in a memoir that's yet to be published, and it's called For the God of Small Children. A little excerpt. As a young man, in my early 20s, I was a conscious objector, and I worked at Altagrace Community Hospital for a couple of years in Berkeley. During the 1969 riots, I was there, and it was a wonderful and horrible time to be a part of all that. But this is about the nursery in which I worked. And Inga, who I will mention in the middle of this, was the head nurse of the nursery. And she comes up in it. So I'm not going to read anything about riots and stuff like that, which just got, But I'm going to read this little bit about the nursery. I'm focusing on children and daily life, which is war. I mean, the day you had today alone. I was on holiday all day today. I took a vacation in Cambria. I saw a tall young woman in her late 20s step out of the elevator this side of maternity, turn, and start to enter the nursery. She stopped and stiffened just inside the open double doorway. Something was wrong. People don't gain the weight of marble or the hardness of bronze. Not the way she did, not that fast. Hope, the older nurse beside me, and I both stared at the young woman as she raised her head and spread her mouth and screamed. I want my baby. My baby. I want to hold my baby. Oh God, let me hold my baby. The young woman screamed, somebody's baby, please. Hope grabbed my forearm and squeezed real hard. Inga stood up at the nurse's station, turned and ran to the young woman in the doorway. She wrapped her arms around the younger woman and held her tight. It's the woman who lost her baby, Hope said, and then loosened her grip on my arm. A crib death. Here? I asked. No. Some babies go home and are healthy for a few weeks or even months. No sign of a problem, and then one morning their parents find them dead in their cribs. They just die during the night for some reason or another. No hope, I said. It's not the parents' fault, she said. It's nothing they did, nothing they didn't do. But they blame themselves. This woman lost her daughter a few months ago. It's a horrible thing they have to live with for the rest of their lives, I said. Of her life, I corrected myself. Hope patted my shoulder with the palm of her small New England hand, and then she went to change a baby. Inga called Sharon, the younger nurse, to get a chair. She sat the woman down in the very center of the nursery. Then she got Sharon to bring the woman a baby and let her hold it for about 10 minutes. Then, because Inga was Inga and maybe brilliant, she got Sharon to bring the woman a second baby and let her hold both babies for half an hour. Long before the young woman left, I turned my back toward her, stepped into the tall shadows in one of the corners of the nursery, and started crying. I couldn't hear anything but the mousy sounds of my own whimpering. When the young woman finished holding the babies and got up to leave, Inga said, "You can come back here and hold a baby anytime you want to. Any time. I stared at the young woman's back, feeling something in all of us was leaving forever, while I watched her walk toward the elevator. The uncountable numbers of times that I have seen a woman, I've seen men too, but I've mostly seen women, turn to another woman and put her arms around this other person, this other woman, and hold and comfort them through all the happiness, joy, and anguish. And I bet you guys have seen something similar millions of times yourselves. It amazes me to no end. Not the hell we live through, but that we live through it. And we usually wind up getting a little help here and there. So every one of you children out here, pat yourself on the back before you go to sleep tonight, and thank yourself for every time you help some stranger or person you knew beside you. You don't get enough applause for that. So moving along with my theme this evening, part of my difficulty has been, I grew up in the sticks. I was a country boy. Some of my family were prosperous ranchers or farmers, and I came from the wing that were, what we used to say, dirt poor. But what's been hard for me is to live in, even back in the 50s, a luxurious culture. Luxurious and rich beyond imagination. And California 50 years ago I'm talking about. So the California that exists today to me is just, I can't believe the amount of wealthy people, you know, in this state. And I enjoy luxury and I enjoy peacefulness. But what's always amazed me is how can our culture support this by having our armies in somebody else's country all the time, throughout my entire life. We've always been somewhere. And we're not always doing good when we're saving the world. Enough of that newspaper letter to the editor. But I was a country boy, so that helped me create this poem, make this poem. Exploding Birds. And ladies, please bear with one or two words in this passage because I'm a guy, okay? And you've heard men, and even worse than men, you've heard a couple of women get off and say a few words now and then. I trust that's true. Exploding Birds. Young American soldiers, men and women, wearing sunglasses and headphones. We shoot pigeons out of the dark rafters in the red barns overseas. Squabs explode in 120-degree heat, all their little pieces burning in the humidity. Pulverized little birds splattering their blood, sweat, and urine on everything. Maybe we're sunbathing on a hotel balcony on vacation, pretending we're Han Solo, Indiana Jones, or Harrison Ford, overlooking the whole third world. Entire populations move like scrap bones, hobbling across the bridges, villages, and fields. More than likely, I'm hallucinating on a joyride in a Yumi, deaf as a sand dune in a storm. Maybe we're marching among corpses in the desert, shuffling step, step, toward images of blindfolds, rifle barrels, and gritty bullet holes in the walls of Baghdad. Maybe we're stepping forward through another minefield, sweating salt tablets out of the backs of our minds. Scrawny Alabama kid with a Killer for Christ tattoo, playing with the shotgun over there is our squad idiot, uncoordinated, slow-witted. But his girlfriend, sister, and his old mom and dad keep phoning to try to tell him how hard it is for them to have to wonder about things and to worry. And he doesn't have a problem understanding that. Maybe he really doesn't want to let anyone down. Copy that. I'm imagining I'm St. Francis, who once after a battle in Europe dropped his sword and lowered his shield, got himself wounded, retreated, AWOL. Francis would think he needed the heart to stop trying to murder any of these other people and desert and go home to stand trial for treason, to hold his wound shut with his fingernails and leave the fighting by walking off this battlefield. Most of us think it's sickening to see this, so we don't look. Some stare. The whole thing's a mess and loud. The helicopters, the missiles, and the bombs. Sergeants yelling at us to get a hard-on and start burning the pigeon shit and mite-infested feathers with flamethrowers. So we will. When I was really young, I kind of thought most of the people I knew were kind of neat and good, and I thought I was kind of good. I didn't think I was so neat, but I thought I was good. And then, of course, as I've aged and played so many different roles and read so many pieces of literature and stuff, gee, there's some kind of rotten characters out there, and saw myself be a little rotten too. So after all those acting roles, it's a little easier for me sometimes to attempt to write an I poem from maybe someone else's perspective, and then, like an actor, use my own meanness or shadow side to empathize even with the bad guys. And in literature and in theater and in movies, the bad guys quite often are more colorful and interesting. And I've been told that in the heterosexual community, which is kind of large, women notoriously fall in love with bad guys. So, whatever that means. So here's my love story for the evening. My love poem for the evening. One of the Russian literature was a big thing to me all through my teens and early 20s, and other countries and literatures became important since then. But the first real big one, other than American literature, was the Russian literature. And Mayakovsky became the famous leading revolutionary poet during just before the Revolutionary War, 1917, 1919. But by the time in the 30s, when he was in his late 30s, almost 40, he wound up committing suicide, and it was a mixture between love lost and watching what Stalin was finally winding up doing to so many people. You got to be careful about artists because they can have a bad day. You know, they think post office workers are problematic. I love smiling between these heavy poems this evening. This is great. But I've had a nice day. And so 50 years later, I finally wrote this poem, empathizing with Mayakovsky, who I was really impressed with in my very early 20s. And that felt good. You know, when you remember someone or something from 50 years ago and you're able to do something with it again, that's a really special, nice gift to have in life. I'm talking too much, but anyhow. I, Mayakovsky. And of course I tried to write it in English, kind of the way he wrote many of his poems. A warning to the West. I've shot myself, Maria. Roulette. I played with a bullet and a revolver as a metaphor, maybe, for the violent madness in life. I wanted to share my words the way I thought a Siberian peasant would share his last borscht and onion and potato on the coldest day in winter with his comrades in a prison camp. So I wrote my epic about my relationship with the workers, the soldiers, the people. I traveled from battlefield to battlefield, city to city, trying to inspire the workers to master themselves and break their chains. I praised our progress. I praised me. I drank, I danced in a marvelous factory. Even my teeth gleamed like a nobleman's chandelier. I was applauded by tyrants and commissars. I lived like a prince. I oppressed a person inside me, like he and all the masses on earth were my appropriated serfs, my personal slaves. And now I'm crawling like a wounded bear, retreating into a Russian forest looking for a cave, clawing the ground, clawing the frozen ice, losing my strength and only finding it harder and harder to breathe. We were lovers, Maria. Remember the beginning, not the end. Maria, I'm down on all fours on your carpet. You could find me with your feet. Grab me around the neck. Pull me up into your bed. Press your palms against my cheeks and kiss me on my lips. Let me shout. Let me talk. Let me say something about all men, if not to you, if not to someone, then to a night star above the fog thickening over me like a blanket as I end my prayers and fall asleep. I dreamed of love my whole life while I worked for fame. Like a vulture in search of dead flesh, pecking the world with its beak to live or escape. I became the revolutionary, the poet, in this holiest of lands. So it's my own fault. I raised the pistol and pulled the trigger with my own hand. Should I hang myself? Have I made enough enemies to get lynched? My breath is blinding my eyes. My limbs and claws are freezing to the ice. Who cares? I did. What does it matter? I still do. The rich get profits off numbers faster and faster, while the workers, the soldiers, the people lose their value altogether. I imagine heaven, Maria, will be a warm room in a wooden dasha, where I'll be reading poems out loud roughly to 12 or so intimate friends, each of us baring our brows and cheeks to the light from a kerosene lamp, as it illuminates the moisture in our eyes, while snow falls outside, quieting our minds. And we drink vodka and sing our hearts out, Maria, like worn-out saints, to recover our strength and rekindle the glow to our halos and our souls. Wow. One little more and I think I'm way over. Oh, I'm way over. Thank you for your coming this evening to let me have you to read these two. And then there will be the open mic after this. Farmer's Market Puppeteer. I did, I think, about 4,000 free puppet shows to people in the San Luis Farmer's Market for about 26 years, while other clients paid to have me elsewhere. I moved slowly with the heavy shoulders of an old farmer in the evening following some cows home to the barn. I remember my grandfather and my dad about to face another night alone at the ranch, on the farm, in a bar. I'm tired after packing my booth and puppets back into the car. I'm exhausted, and there's still hours yet to wander over memories like entries in account books of heart-to-hearts and hugs, listed like pounds, bushels, and bales of fruit and vegetables and grains and cotton, straw and hay. I'm slow and achy, but I've time. I had time too in the beginning, so I started to overcome my shyness and fear by standing with children in public, holding puppets up and acting with them on my hands. And families started trusting me to get their kids laughing. And they did so hard they got the giggles. And some of the adults and older kids joined in. And we felt our feelings rush through us as we booed villains and tingled, and yelled to heroes and warmed, and stretched our abilities maybe a little more to give and take and share. So tomorrow, when we arrive in the garden for the planting, we'll see we won't harm ourselves or our neighbors or anyone else living far away. And then we'll meet again in the market, in the street, to distribute the harvest among everyone, because even in the dark of our unlit places, whether it's a dimming eyesight or just a dream, we'll still see 3 billion children standing up and screaming at life, ourselves, and me, to not be so selfish or competitive or stooped under the weight of things. Thank you, everyone, very much.
Okay, 10-minute break, and I'm going to drink outside. If you didn't get one already, and we'll be back here for the open.